morning. Welcome to Viking Preparedness. I'm Pastor Joe Fox with a SITREP. Dun, dun, dun. World SITREP. Dun, dun, dun. Imagine, if you will, that instead of this lush Costa Rican jungle scene behind me, there's a green screen and the map can flash and change and go to the countries that we're talking about. But what you can do is follow along and have a cell phone or another computer page open or something. And if you don't know exactly where these countries are and who borders these countries, look them up. Could be important. In no particular order, but in kind of an order. And I took notes to make sure I give you everything. And this is not comprehensive by any means. As a matter of fact, I am suffering from a lack of news coming from several places. South Africa is one. And so if you are finely attuned to what's going on in and around and with South Africa, please send me an email and update me. If you know what's going on in Latin America, not that you look it up and, it's like, oh, I'm going to go look this up. And no, I mean, it's something you've been following and you know about it. Send me an email, please. Those are two things that I'd kind of like to know what's going on there, and I don't have anything on them today. All right, let's talk about Libya. Libya is interesting, and it's getting more complicated. Libya, since 2014, has been going through, a civil war. And the sides and who supports those sides is weird. Why? Well, I'll get to that. I'll do that part at the end. What happened was in 2014, there was an election. Very low turnout. 18% of the population turned out to vote. And the House of Representatives was elected. And then there was a break between them and the Prime Minister over deals going forward or something. And so they basically split. And the House of Representatives moved out of Tripoli to Tobruk of World War II fame and set up camp there. And it's interesting to me, I don't claim to know everything about what's going on there, but they have on their side the House of Representatives, the Libyan National Army, most of the Navy, and most of the Air Force. So you would think if they had all that, why would they leave Tripoli, the capital? But they did. And their leader is some guy named Haftar. And when I say their leader, the House of Representatives picked him, selected him, appointed him to be their commander-in-chief, if you will, of the LNA, Libyan National Army. And then on the other side, so that's the LNA, right? It gets complicated. That's the LNA. And they're in Tobruk, and they're based around the House of Representatives, and they have big chunks of their own military with them, the LNA. Haftar is in charge. Then you have the GNA, right? And that's the Government of National Accord, and that's the Prime Minister al-Sarraj. They stayed in Tripoli, and those are the two sides. Now, the UN, the EU minus France, Greece, and Cyprus, the US, of course, the UK, Italy, Iran, all support the Tripoli government, the GNA. They're the ones that are still in Tripoli, still in the capital, and we all support them. Okay. Well, the LNA, under Haftar, who moved out to Tobruk, they're supported, it's a long list. They're supported by Sudan, Syria, one way or another, whether that's direct physical support, political support, weapons support, that kind of thing. Israel, Russia, UAE, France, Saudi, Iran, again, they're playing both sides, Greece, Cyprus, and Jordan. The other side has Turkey on it. Our side, Turkey supports. Now, sure, most of the EU and the UN said to do it. But it's interesting because Turkey started making moves against the government in out there in Tobruk. And people started getting all upset about it. And at first I thought they were supporting a different side than we were. That's what started me looking at this whole thing. But no, they're supporting the side we support. They're just doing it a little bit more forcefully, I think, than we like. And it sets them at odds with a lot of other people, which is kind of scary. Now, why am I bringing that up now? Because there's a fracture point there with the EU. France, Cyprus, and Greece are supporting the side that is out there in Tobruk, whereas everybody else is supporting the people still in the capital, the GNA. So there's a friction point there, and suddenly Russia is getting involved. Dun, dun, dun. And Russia is getting involved in Libya now through the guise of their little green men. That's what they call them. They're contractors, and their main contractor group is called Wagner, the Wagner Group. And they're kind of like Blackwater was with us. You know, they're pseudo-governmental, lots of connections. They do what the government wants them to do. They're not truly mercenaries working for the highest bidder, just like Blackwater wasn't truly mercenaries. You know, they went and did things that the U.S. government supported. Wagner Group has started showing up to stiffen the LNA out in Tobruk. And so that's starting to pit Russia with France, Cyprus, and Greece, right, against the UN, EU, US, UK, you know, that kind of thing. And so that's looking kind of interesting to me. Russia is making moves right now. Remember how before I told you how China has been making moves for years in Africa? Resources, right? Oh, do you know why everybody's fighting over Libya? Do you know why we care? Why do we care? I mean, it's sand. We've bombed it before, you know, big deal. Because it has the largest reserves of oil in Africa. In Africa. Huge continent, right? Largest reserves of oil are controlled by Libya. Most of them as yet untapped. So yeah, the Russians want it, we want it, and yeah, that's how that's going. The Russians think that if, you know, their side wins, they'll get good deals. We think if our side wins, we'll get good deals. You know, whatever. No blood for oil, right? So anyway, with the Russian Wagner Group going in there, it could see things pick up, escalate, professionalize, if you will. All right, so Russia has been pushing against us in Syria. Excuse me. I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day. I don't blame Russia for backing Assad because he gives them access to a warm water port. And they don't have a lot of those, right? They're a far northern country. Their ports get iced over and stuff. And so having access to a warm water port, that's worth something. Also, gas lines getting ready to go through that part of the world. They want control of that. How important is oil and gas? Whew, let me tell you, as far as making the world go round, it's real important. And yes, blood for oil happens all the time. And so they've been in Syria and we've been in Syria, right? Dun, dun, dun. I think we started ISIS, which was stupid. But we've been in there mixing it up a little bit. We bombed their little green men. If you remember a while ago, a couple years ago now, they were attacking a special forces outpost, and the SF guys just brought max scunyon on them in the form of and stuff like that. I think they killed 200 of them. But they're getting involved in Africa, and they have, I wrote this down too, they have new bases going up in Egypt, Sudan, the Central African Republic, Eritrea, Madagascar, and Mozambique. So the Chinese were in there, and then we started AFRICOM as kind of a counter to what the Chinese were doing. And then I think the Russians looked around and said, hey, China and the U.S. are getting pretty big, hot, and heavy out there in Africa. We better get a presence known, or, we're just going to be getting scraps from the table. And so they're starting to go in there. So now we have the three major powers, military, economic, well, maybe not economic. Russia's not that economic. But three major military powers, all kind of converging in Africa, which is kind of interesting, especially when you start reading, things like Revelation, stuff like that. They're increasing their troop numbers in these countries. They're conducting training of military forces in these countries. They're doing what we do. We go all over the world. The U.S., we send special forces and other guys and gals all over the world to generate goodwill, to make contacts, to gather intel, all that stuff. They're starting to play that game too. And they're starting to use their little green men. Some of the stuff they do is on the down low, some of it's out in the open, some of it's what we call less visible or low visibility. It's like they're not hiding it, but they're not really advertising it. But they're doing a lot of that in Africa. So that's kind of interesting, especially when you put that in with the what's going on in Libya. They're kind of making a string of pearls there to take a Chinese thing. Let's talk about the Chinese. Let's talk about the Philippines. Once our stalwart ally, like super hardcore allies. I don't know what happened between Trump and Duterte. Maybe it's just a clash of egos, But we're not getting along with the Philippines very much anymore. And the Philippines has made a pretty strong shift towards China. Now, and China and the Philippines have some friction points. China is claiming a big chunk of what's the South China Sea, islands and stuff, that are within the exclusive economic zones and others. They're claimed by about 5 different countries, different chunks of the South China Sea. And some of these claims, if you look it up and look at it, are outrageous. It would be like us claiming something in the Mediterranean, as in our, we need that, as opposed to Greece, Cyprus, or, whatever. So China has claimed, on paper at least, and in some cases they're moving physically in that area, stuff that the Philippines is like, no, this is ours. And so we were on the Philippine side. We did lots of military exercises there. We plussed up their military. We gave them all kinds of military hardware. We're fighting Islamic radicals down in their southern islands. And all of a sudden, Duterte, he starts canceling all our agreements. He starts canceling exercises, and he's making nice to China. I think, it could be he's smart. He sees the writing on the wall, and he sees China is the power ascending, and so he wants to get in on the ground floor with that, perhaps. But anyway, that's what's going on there. The Philippines has taken a pretty hard turn towards China, and their military's not super happy about that. That could lead to problems. The Philippines has had, unrest, think coup, in their past, and that could be interesting because I've met many of the Philippine generals. Now, this was years ago, so not the current ones, and colonels and stuff like that, and they're pretty anti-communist. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes. Sticking in Asia, North Korea, you probably saw this. Reports are out that they think they've probably miniaturized nukes and are now capable of putting them on missiles. Yawn. That's all I can say about that. But it's something. I'm not losing sleep over it personally. Iran. They've been having all those fires and explosions, right? I'll get to that. We'll come up to the big explosion in Beirut. Iran does stupid stuff because, I'll be nice, because of their background. They built this big, floating barge that was mocked up to look like a U.S. aircraft carrier, painted it with markings and everything. And then they would practice attacking it and bombing it. And it was really more for propaganda value than anything else. And, you know, you don't really sink your target barges. You know, you hit them with things that don't really sink them, and then you repair it. And evidently, they screwed up again. They struck this thing somehow they shouldn't have, and it's listing hard to port. The left side is in the water. The whole thing's turned like 90 degrees, this aircraft carrier mock-up. And they were trying to drag it back to shore or whatever. And I guess it's sinking right in one of the major shipping lanes of Iran. Bandar Abbas is like a big port facility, and it's kind of sinking right there in the middle of it, which is going to create problems for them. And I was reading an article that said Iran doesn't really have the resources, or it's going to take a lot to generate the resources to go, you know, salvage that thing, cut it up, and remove it from the shipping lanes. I guess they could blow it up, blow it to smithereens. So that's going on there. Big explosion, right, in Beirut. Been to Beirut. Yes, I have. My wife's been to Beirut. Yes, she has. We weren't together. Not really, but kind of. Big explosion. I'm leaning towards, this is me now, I'm leaning towards, and this is what, 24 hours later, accidente. Oh yeah, I am. And the reason I am is because Israel is not shy about taking credit for things. And sometimes they do it kind of tongue-in-cheek and on the sly. Like, we have no comment on that. Or, you know, bad things happen to bad people. You know, they'll say things like that, which isn't really denying it. But in this case, they said we didn't do it strongly. That wasn't us. So I don't think they did it. Trump said it was a bomb, and then they called him on it, and then he said, well, my generals told me that. They know better. And now I saw some report that unnamed sources in the Pentagon are saying no. Let me tell you, when something like this happens, I do know about this. That thing goes boom. Little alarm bells start ringing. Whatever their modern version of beepers is start going off. And people gather, and every little bit of information on that event, because it was a major event, right, gets sucked in, from all the Twitter videos to, you know, embassy reports, satellite reports, other things. All the information gets sucked into a hub, into a working group, and they start analyzing that, because there are 4-star generals and politicians that want to know right now what's going on, right? And you know, they analyze the explosive characteristics, the smoke, the color, the blast, the brisance, you know, and they're smart people. They know what blew up, right? That they know what blew up. They don't know right away how it blew up, but they know what blew up pretty quickly. What I'm thinking is, I saw a really cool picture, really horrifying picture of supposedly that warehouse that blew up, where they were stacking, you know, those big woven bags they have that you can hook a forklift through and lift them up, or you can hook a cargo hook on them and take it up off the barge and out. I have several of them. Those things full of basically ammonia nitrate just being stacked in this warehouse. Excuse me. And it's like, yep, that is Islamic culture. I've lived it. A lot of you have lived it. They have this thing of inshallah, if God wills it, and it permeates everything they do, and they use it a lot as an excuse. Like, throw the trash down there. If God wants it to be picked up, it will be. Inshallah. Yeah, just put it back there. It won't blow up, inshallah. And so stuff happens. Their maintenance records are terrible. We're going long, so I don't have time to tell you a story on that. But, yeah, I think it might have been a mistake. I also think it might have been a Hezbollah storage facility. I mean, because even the government themselves, it's not in the government's interest to say we're idiots and we allowed, 10,000 pounds or whatever they said, a bazillion pounds of confiscated explosives to be kept there. Nobody does that. Right? Nobody does that. The government of Lebanon is weak. That they don't exercise a lot of control of Lebanon. Hezbollah does. And so Hezbollah probably had stored in that ammonia nitrate thing downtown where the Israelis wouldn't bomb it because it would kill all these innocent people and make them look bad. They probably had rocket fuel and stuff like that. I don't know. People do know. The big we knows what it was. But they probably had extra stuff stored in there. And probably started as a regular fire and it got out of control and boom, 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 man. So doom on you, man. So that's what I'm leaning towards. We'll see. We'll see. I bet you things are happening in D.C. area and wherever they meet in Israel. I don't know where their Department of Defense meets or whatever. But yeah, that was interesting. So, Germany. We're taking about a third so far of our troops out of Germany, moving them to other places like Italy and Belgium and whatnot. We are doing that because it's payback. It's punishment. Germany's just not playing ball. They want us to protect them, but they're not doing their bit. And as Trump said, and I agree with him on this, you guys are sending the Russians, your number one potential enemy, billions of dollars a year to buy gas and oil. I think gas. And at the same time, you're not spending anything for defense. You're leaving that totally on the American taxpayer to pay for your defense. And he's been bugging them since he's been in office. You need to come up to 2%, and you need to do some payback because you haven't been paying 2% forever. And 2% is just the arbitrary figure that they've come up with, or it might be 2.5%, whatever. Oh, by the way, that stuff I was talking about the other day, some of you got it right. Tincture of benzoin. That's what it was. People are going, what? We're like, all right, watch this. You're not paying your share. You're trying to make us pay. We have paid forever. You've never stepped up to the plate. We're taking our troops out. And when you take our troops out, that's a huge economic hit to the Germans. The Russians are laughing. They're like, look at this thing falling apart. Awesome. That's not good for us. But in principle, I agree. We can still keep our forces in Europe, although we're not. I want to see us move more to Poland. Poland's nice. I went to Poland a couple times, and I was under the wrong impression when I first went on what Poland was like. Poland's nice, in my experience. We're sending about half of those. We have about 35,000, so call it 36 to make the math right. We're pulling 12 out, so that's a third, right? About half of that third is going to other countries in Europe, like I said, Italy, Belgium, wherever. And about half are coming back to the U.S. for now. Good. That's what I say. Good. But it's going to hurt the economy. These soldiers, not only, does the U.S. buy stuff from Germany to keep the bases going from water to electricity to whatever, these soldiers shop and they eat and they carry on life with big army bucks, or Air Force bucks. And they put it into the economy, and it's going to hurt those economies. The Germans, they've gotten so much self-guilt that they've just lost, almost embarrassed to admit I got German Austrian blood in me. All right, exclusively. China. Remember all those seed packets? So many of you wrote me, Pastor Joe, you got to let people know about these seed packets. You got to let people know, man. You got to tell people about this. You got to warn people. Please. You think if you saw it and I saw it and everybody else saw it, I got to say anything? So they've analyzed many of those seed packets. They're not invasive species. They're not, chemical warfare bombs that they want people to plant. It was mostly a scam a marketing scam is mostly what it was. They've determined this, and they looked at the, I wrote down what some of them were. They had a list of about 20 different kinds of seeds they were. Mustard, cabbage, morning glory, various herbs, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. It was just regular seeds, nothing too horrible. They still don't want people to plant them and stuff, which I think that's smart. But it was no big, huge conspiracy. It was a marketing scam. So that was that. India, China, they were mixing it up on their border there a little bit. Seems to be settling down. Neither side's totally happy. And China has about 25,000 forces, tanks, artillery, soldiers, right behind that line of contention that they've moved into position, who haven't left yet. And so if any of y'all play Risk, when you start seeing that guy building up forces on the border, it makes you take pause, right? What are you doing over there, man? Why don't you step down a little bit? You're making me nervous, right? So I don't think it's over, but it's not hot right now. So that's what's going on there. Three Gorges Dam in China, that was another thing. Oh, Pastor Joe, you got to talk about this. Three Gorges Dam, chaos is coming. It's going to flood the whole world. Three Gorges Dam is holding. It's fine. No one's really worried about it. It's raining. It's wet. I saw my friend, I've never met him in person, but I like him, Gordon Tickle in Thailand. Yeah, the rivers are up. Okay. Three Gorges Dam remains. It's okay. Some of us just want so much drama in our lives. And then I guess I'll kind of wrap up the world for our international Vikings. Aren't you glad I didn't start with the U.S.? And I'm not going to hammer a whole lot on it. The Grand Poobah of the NFAC, Grand Master Bill or whatever his name is, the Samuel Jackson wannabe. Right? I think they're done. I think they had great potential. And when I say great potential, that's like me saying Hitler was a great man. It doesn't mean I think what he's doing was good. It doesn't mean I think, I aspire to he was an evil man. But he did some amazing things if you look at it from a leadership perspective. And I think the NFAC, same thing. I think they had great potential, which I just enjoyed watching from an organizational perspective. I think it's gone, man. I think it's gone. They started out with the march, to my understanding. I'm sure they did little actions before that. They started out with a PR campaign stunt when they marched on Stone Mountain, Georgia, with about 100 people. And that was cool, and I talked about that here. Again, take my cool in the way I intend it. Clearly, although I am wearing a very nice black hoodie, I'm not going to march with the guys, right? But that went pretty well. And then they doubled it, and they were in Louisville, Kentucky. Is that how you say it, Louisville? I don't think it's Louisville, right? Louisville. And it looked to me like they had about more, maybe 300 people. And then they just messed up by the numbers, and I talked about that. And the biggest one that got the most press was the negligent discharge where 3 people were injured. And so trying to do damage control, Grandmaster Poobah, skinny-armed little know-nothing, and he probably was in the military. He was probably a clerk typist for about 3 years, probably got out as a PFC or a E4. He just piled on to himself, man. He is an idiot. I mean, he's just a total idiot when it comes to firearms. He has a foul mouth on him, and he tries to get through on bluster. But if you look at him, his arms are about as big as my wrists. And he's got a mean face, and he talks and he curses every other word. And I guess, he talks with force, and that works on weak people. But he said stupid thing after stupid thing after stupid thing about firearms that clearly he doesn't have a clue about firearms, and the firearms YouTube community took him to task and just trashed him. And then he took that video down, but it's too late. It's the internet, man. It's everywhere. And so he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he's not worthy of leading a large group. I think that group is done. I really do. Could be wrong. Never underestimate the something of stupid people in large numbers. Yeah, he's going to lose followers big time. So good, because he was up to no good. So that guy. Oil and gas industry is hammered. I have friends in the oil and gas industry, and everybody's home, not working. They're stacking rigs, they're closing down wells, capping wells. Guys aren't working. They're all sitting at home. And the oil and gas industry accounts for about 8% of the U.S. economy, of the GDP. But it's really more than that. You know, Reagan, trickle-down economics, right? You pay this guy $120,000, $200,000 a year to do whatever he does in the oil and gas industry. You know what he does with that money? He spends it. They spend it all, man. They go out to eat, they buy other houses, they redo houses, they buy guns and snowmobiles and four-wheelers and pickup trucks and cars. And they basically flow all that money right into the American economy. And so in places like the Bakken and, you know, what's it called up in North Dakota? I can't remember right now. Maybe that's the Bakken. Whatever. We have these big oil fields where basically that's the industry. Everybody there is making their money on the oil industry, whether they're working with oil and gas or not. And now those people aren't. And when you combine that with COVID, like restaurants and things like that, car dealerships, you know, everything, we're hurting. Our economy is hurting. Americans vote their pocketbook.